Hi everyone, Aiden here with eTrailer.com. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Pace Edwards Ultragroove Retractable hard tonneau cover here on our 2013 Ram 2500. Now this is going to give you a nice cover for your bed space, whether you're looking to lock up some items inside so they're secure and safe, looking to improve your fuel economy, or just looking for something to cover that bed up, make it look nice and clean. This is going to get the job done while also having the UltraGroove system here to add stuff like ladder racks or overlanding racks. You don't have to sacrifice that functionality of your bed just because you have a tonneau cover on. Let's check it out. Lots of times with these tonneau covers, you have to pick and choose whether you want the cover or whether you want something like a ladder rack. But with this, we have the option to have both. With these slots here on our rails, we can slide in accessories and adjust them back and forth along the whole length of the tonneau cover, and those uprights will sit on top of the bed, so we can independently operate our tonneau cover, still have the bed covered up, but also have that raised storage above the bed. It is going to be a retractable tonneau cover, so everything retracts into a canister in the bed whenever we're not using it. So underneath here we've got a handle that we can simply turn and latch in right there. That's gonna have this unlocked, and then just push the cover back. It'll slide up into the canister here really simply. You don't have to walk it back or anything like that. And everything is contained up here towards the cab of the truck where we don't have to worry about it as much. When you're trying to figure out what tonneau cover is right for your truck and your application, you've got a couple different options. My personal favorite is this canister style because I think it's the most out of the way. You've got the soft roll-up covers that will have a roll kind of right up here, kind of blocking the back window a little bit, but they're just not as nice. Then you also have the tri-fold ones that are big panels that are typically hard covers, but they fold up in 3 sections, and oftentimes when you have it fully folded up, it's going to completely block your window. These canister ones are really nice because it's not going to block anything here, and it's going to take up minimal bed space. That is the one downside here, is that we have the canister in the bed, but it isn't going to fully take up the bed. There's room underneath where I can still slide in lumber, anything like that that has an elongated load where we need to have it up against the cab of the truck here, but we still have everything contained and in a nice sealed package. Now the integrated handle makes it really easy to, again, operate the cover from the tailgate. So we can pull it out, and you'll hear these latches happening all throughout. So at 12-inch intervals, we've got different stops here. So if we have a partial load, maybe some ladders or something kind of sticking out the back, propped up on the tailgate, we don't have to have this thing fully open. We can have it partially closed to account for that, still get some coverage, but also have it open for that elongated load. I really like this, and I like having the handle to do it because it makes the whole process a lot simpler. I will say that Retrax has a very similar style of tonneau cover that has these rails and that is retractable into a canister, but I like that retraction a lot better because you can stop that at any point along the rails here, so we don't have to be limited to those 12-inch intervals. That's a really big upside for me because I can have all that fine-tuning adjustment that I want. The downside to that is I don't think it works as smoothly as the Pace Edwards here. This one has a much smoother glide in operation. It has that handle so I can operate it all from the tailgate. The Retrax does not. You have to kind of walk it back, and sometimes it gets a little bound up on the rails because you're pulling it from one side. It's just kind of a hassle. So those are the upsides and downsides comparing the two. One other comparison I will make is just the overall sturdiness of the cover. Even though this is a hard cover, it does have a bit of flex to it. The Retrax one is very solid, so if you were to bring a tool bag or something kind of heavy and set it up on top of the tonneau cover while you get the tailgate open, I would feel a little bit more comfortable setting that load on the Retrax than I would on the Pace Edwards here, just because we do have a bit of flex. Overall though, this is still going to be a lot better than a just traditional soft tonneau cover because it does have that metal underneath to protect against anyone trying to cut it open or get inside. It's going to be really sturdy. As far as the aesthetics go, I think this looks really good on the truck here. The end rails here just kind of taper off naturally towards the end of the truck, and it all looks very factory. There's not any weird gaps. All the weather seals sit really flush here, so it makes me really confident in its ability to resist rain and water intrusion. If water does get inside, you do have drains integrated on the end rails and on the canister, so you don't have to worry about that pooling up in your bed. but I think water's gonna have a hard time getting in to begin with, just because everything sits on here so well and does fit very nicely. At the highest point, it only sticks up about an inch from your bed rails, so it is going to be fairly low profile, keeping it nice and sleek, and you don't really notice it too much when it's on the truck. It doesn't stick out. Next to some of those drain points, you can see the clamps that actually hold this in place. Everything attaches really well, and you've got these small supports on the other side too to help support the weight if you do have a ladder rack on here. So just pushing down with my hand, everything feels very solid. Sometimes with other tonneau covers, you'll feel a bit of flex there when you push down like that. So I am confident putting a loaded weight up here with a ladder rack that it's gonna be secure. And speaking of how it attaches, let's check out that install process now. The first step of our installation is to get the canister out of the box and remove these plywood protective sides. We've just got these 10mm screws holding it in. We'll undo those on both sides of the canister here and discard the plywood. At this point, you can lift the canister up into the bed. I've got it up here just on my own. It's not too heavy. The only thing you might have to worry about is just if your arms are long enough to kind of reach across the whole canister here, but the actual weight isn't bad. You'll notice on this side there's a label that says cab side, so that's going to go towards our cab. And I'm just gonna set it on something elevated. So I've got these just plastic totes in here right now to kind of set it above the bed rails so we can install the actual rails of the cover. For our rails, we wanna make sure we get the correct side. I can tell this is the driver's side because this rubber flange here faces the outer edge of the vehicle. And we want the rounded portion towards the tailgate. Up here it's nice and flat, so we know that goes towards our cab. Now up here on the canister, we've got a little latch. You can kind of push this in by hand. If it moves around a little bit, it might pop out, but if you can get that to stay in, that's gonna help the installation here a lot better. And we've got this metal track. There's a little lip right here and a hole for our screw. What I'm gonna do is kind of tilt the rail into place and kind of try to catch it on that outer lip right there so I can get it lined up here. This will be hard to see, so it'll be more of a feeling thing once you get it at home. But you can kind of line up the rail with that lip, rotate it down. Might have to kind of back it up a little bit here. We'll rotate it down right here, and once it's rotated down flat, you can get it slid in. Again, this is a little tricky to do. You can see it's starting to move a little bit there, and this may be helpful with an extra set of hands to kind of steady the canister while you're doing this and help guide it in, but it is doable on your own. And we want to get it in to where the threaded holes on the bottom of the rail here line up with that hole on the canister that we just checked out. So underneath, we're gonna have our screws, Phillips head screws with a lock washer and a flat washer. So just kind of get that guided into place, and we can start to thread it in. Looks like right about there, it's getting started. So just run that down, get it tightened up, and we can repeat that on both sides. And at this point, the whole assembly can rest on the bed rails of our truck. So I'm just going to lift up and remove our little totes we were using as supports. When you do this, just make sure everything is mostly centered up. We can get a better, more accurate measurement of this later. We want to make sure it's all resting in there nice and neat. At this point, we're ready to shut the tailgate and kind of test the fitment of the rails here. We want to pull them pretty much as close to the tailgate as they'll go. You can actually get a pretty good grip on it here and pull them kind of by the T-track here. And just make sure everything's sitting fairly evenly here. And we actually have an included tool that we can use to check the spacing and everything here to make sure it's spaced properly from the tailgate. And here's a better look at that little tool. We are gonna have a bunch of little notches coming off of it, and this smaller one here, that's gonna be about 1/4 of an inch. And that's gonna be able to check our spacing between the end of the rail right here and our tailgate. So as long as that fits in there and kind of touches on both sides, we should be all good with our spacing. At this point, we're gonna want to install the foam seal on the front of the bed right here. That's gonna sit underneath the top cover and help give us a better weather seal. We're not gonna be leaving this tonneau cover on today though. So we're not gonna peel the adhesive and actually stick it on. When you do that though, just make sure that you clean the area, get the surface nice and smooth so that adhesive sticks and stays. Once that's been done though, we can take our top cover here and place it over top the canister here. We've got 2 holes, one on either side, that will line up with some threads on the canister. And we can use our provided screws to attach those. So just slide that back, and once it's lined up, you should see this nice flush surface here, letting us know everything is even. And just run those screws down on either side and tighten them evenly. So at this point, we just want to check on how level our rails are sitting. We can kind of come to the end of the truck bed where the camera is right now and look down the rail just to see if it's sitting level with the bed rail or if it's kind of tilted down and into the truck bed. Ours is sitting pretty level right now. Once we get the clamps in place, it'll sit a little bit more normally. But if you aren't happy with that levelness, you can use the included shims here. That's going to just prop up the rail a little bit. To do that, all you gotta do is slide the whole assembly down towards the tailgate and install these shims. They've got some adhesive on the back, just underneath the canister here to kind of bring that end up. You can slide it back over, check that levelness again, and see if you need to add another shim. Moving on to our clamp extensions, these are the pieces that are gonna be labeled. So this one is BR, which is back right, or back passenger side. And all of them are gonna be labeled for the specific sides because we wanna make sure that these shims are facing the end of the vehicle here and everything is oriented the correct way. Now, if you come to the underside of the rail here, there's a small lip. I'm just gonna feel along there with my thumb, and then right about here, I feel a cutout. That's where the portion of the extension right there is gonna slot in. You can see there's kind of a track system for it there with that shim facing the outside. So I'll come back to that cutout, get that lined up with the cutout, and then slide it towards the tailgate here. And you can see here, it's kind of locked in, and we just wanna line it up to where it's just lined up with the end of that cutout. Once it's sitting right there, we've got a portion right here where we can feed our 5/32 Allen up through. It'll go into that set screw that's in there, and we can just tighten that down to keep this in its place. Now for the actual clamps, there is some slight differences to take note of. For these pieces here that actually slot into those clamp extensions, let me hold it maybe like this. You can see the difference. We've got a short one and a long one. I used the long one closer to the cab, and I'm gonna use this short one closer to the tailgate. Depending on your specific year, make, model, that might differ for you. So just be sure to try them both out, see what fits best. And we can then take the other end of our clamp, slot this in just like that. And then we can take this track portion and slide that into our clamp extension. Now, depending on how much room you have up here with a bed liner or something like that, that could also affect this. So I'm gonna actually put this end of the clamp in first to that extension. It slots in just like that, and then meet the other end on the other side. This is going to be a pretty snug fit. Much better on the tailgate end though than it was by the cab. And this portion, let me grab another one here, with the rounded edge, that's gonna be pressing up against the actual bed rail on the inside edge, kind of clamping it together. So just make sure it's all lined up properly. From here, we can actually take one of our threaded hand knobs, and we've got 2. One slightly longer for that longer end of the clamp. We're gonna be using the shorter one on this one. And on here, we're gonna add a lock washer, a flat washer, and then on the other side, we're gonna have this kind of threaded barrel. We're just gonna feed these threads through, and there is a notched portion on the other side that'll line up with the threads on that barrel. So that barrel is gonna just kinda keep things sandwiched together here and serve as our plate on the other end. Might be a little tricky to get that started because you're kind of working blind, but you can kind of peek around the side here and get that started. There we go. And from there, just kind of hold that barrel end in place, run the hand knob down, and make sure everything is nice and snug before we go and repeat this process in the other 3 corners. Once all the clamps are installed, we can take our kickstands and take the wing nut off of this threaded end right here, and we're gonna slide that through the hole that's kind of on our clamps right here. And once those threads are poking out the other side, we can add our washer, lock washer, and wing nut there. And we can snug that down most of the way. But we want to leave some room to move and adjust this kickstand. We want that kickstand to be facing pretty much perpendicular to the side of our bed here. And we're just going to rotate the plastic hand knob on that kickstand to extend it out. We want to do that until it makes contact with the outside edge of our bed here. And make sure that it's not pointing too angled. So if we need to, there's a slight angle right here on the inner edge of the bed. We can actually back this off a little bit and position this more upward to kind of match the angle of that part of the bed. Basically, just want that foot to make really solid contact with wherever it's going to be going into. Right there seems to be pretty good. So we're just gonna get that tightened down. And then we can tighten our wing nut here just to make sure everything's secure and supported. Next, we can install our drain tubes starting at the end of our rails here by the tailgate. We're just gonna have these black fittings that will thread into the bottom of the rails. You can kind of feel around right there are the threads. And I will say on our truck today, we actually have some pretty limited clearance here. We did a test fit and it does fit, and it doesn't pinch the drain tube too much. So I don't think it should cause any issues. So just get that threaded in, just hand tight is fine. And once that's attached, we can take our clear drain tube. And since we have pretty limited clearance here, we'll just kind of sneak it onto that fitting. May have to kind of flex it out a little bit, but we can push that in place. Right there, and you see it doesn't actually pinch that end, so we should get good flow through there. And then the other end can go out of our bed. Our truck today does have some factory holes made already, so we don't have to drill, but just keep in mind, depending on your truck, the package, and the bed liner, you may have to drill some holes for these to route them outside the bed. So for us, we're just going to feed it through that existing hole, face down, and all that water will drain down through this tube. So it's gonna be a pretty tight squeeze for me under here, but I'll do my best to stay out of the way and show you where the second drain tube's gonna go. We've got our free end here that'll go outside the bed. Again, we have a factory hole ready to go for us that'll just feed that out. And then we've got our end with the blue seal. That's just going to push up into place on the canister with the preset holes. And that drain installation process that we did on the passenger side here will get repeated on the driver's side. With all of that complete, we're ready to test out the cover. You've got the strap here that you can use to pull it out. You'll hear it locking at those intervals. And then once it's at the end, we can shut our tailgate, check our seals and make sure everything's sitting on there properly. And it looks like it's all fitting really well. Then we can go ahead and check the closing. To do that, we'll rotate our lever here, kind of lock that in, and then just push it back out. Everything goes really smooth. There's no binds or anything on the cover, so we know we're all set. And with everything installed and working smoothly, we're done. The install process wasn't too bad. Comparing it again to the Retrax tonneau covers, it is a little bit more involved. There are more points of adjustment and fine tuning with this cover that stretch the install process out a little bit. Nothing crazy, but just enough to be noticeable. I think it's not that much of a trade-off though, because the end result is something that operates a lot smoother. Not to mention you get that handle to be able to pull the cover out right here from the tailgate really simply. And it's gonna function pretty much the exact same way with the integrated stops, with the T-track on the rails for accessories, and it's gonna give you a really good product for your Ram here. Thanks for watching.